Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Alicia Mackay Show on today, Friday, the 12th of August, where I've got deep regret, quite frankly, for coming on this show and telling you guys quite recently that the end of winter was coming because I'm currently holding a hot wheat bag on my lap. Shit is cold, man. What's going on?
Absolutely put the moz on the weather. The week after you said it was easing, it was the crispest I have felt it for a long time.
I have angered the weather goddess. That is definitely true. But look, I hope you're all out there surviving what I've just discovered is being called the Big Sick, because the Big Sick, indeed, we are now, I think that the latest figures that have come out have said that the amount of people taking more than a week off because they're ill has doubled in the last 3 months, which I'm not even remotely surprised about, because even if you're managing to avoid being ill, children are dropping like flies. I haven't managed to get all 3 of mine to school on the same day for more than a couple of days for literally months now. And when we get sick, I feel like we're no longer compassionate toward each other. We're just kind of annoyed. So someone's like, oh, I'm not feeling very well. And everyone's like, cool, great. This again. Love that for you.
Although there's a bit of a contrast between how valid being sick makes a cancellation now. So previously people might have soldiered on and turned up to work or done the thing and, oh, that's fine. Now you can just say, I've got COVID. And people are like, yep, no worries. Reschedule. Understand.
So, yes, for COVID. But do you think that same latitude?
Just say it's COVID. Just say it's COVID then.
Oh no, because then it won't work. So, like, I had another COVID a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, I had to read. Yes, and I had to. I just did, and I had to call the client and be like, "Hello, client, I can't come to your house or whatever because I'm COVID," and they were like, "Oh gosh, of course, go well, young lady." But then
were you going to their house?
No, I wasn't actually. We were going on a little holiday, a little jaunt, little junket.
Speaking of jaunts, an alarming headline I saw yesterday was that Air New Zealand have reduced flights because they can't get staff because they're all sick too. So hopefully that, if you've got flights with Air New Zealand, maybe double check those.
Yeah,
oh wow!
Slight clarification there. They are reducing, or they're cutting flights over the next few months so that they can have backup capacity staff. And there's a lot of very angry people doing vox pops on the news at the moment because they haven't actually announced which flights yet, but they have announced that 100,000 people will be affected.
Oh, we all love a lottery, though. We absolutely love a gamble. I wonder who's... Okay, so should we diversify our risk if we fly to Australia and get on different planes?
No. And quite frankly, even though Air New Zealand are having a bit of a tough time, like we all are, they're still my favourites, you know? And so I stand in solidarity with Air New Zealand because, as we well know, CV, Mummy doesn't fly Jetstar. And she doesn't fly bloody Qantas either anymore because Australia, they don't even tell you they're going to cancel some flights. They just get up in the morning and they're like, ha, nah. So I don't have any time for that shit. Anyway, we're all sick.
I have a lot of love left for Air New Zealand just through my panic migration flight home from Melbourne before the first lockdown. They were so kind, given changing conditions, panicked people, including myself, who left everything at air security. I left my wallet, I left my phone because I was just so worried about not making this last flight before lockdown. And I got to the gate, they told me to sit on the plane. They went and got the stuff from security for me, and it was a great deal of kindness that they didn't have to do on a day like that. So Air New Zealand has some credit in my book.
Oh, I love that. And actually, I recently sent an email into Air New Zealand highlighting an incredible customer service experience I had with my family. Very similar setup where everybody could have been really stressed and freaked out because we were running late for a flight and there were a lot of people and there was a dog and it was just all hard. And the guy was funny and light and eased the whole process when he did not have to. He went above and beyond. And they're the only airline I've experienced those kind of interactions.
I don't want to bring up what might be accused of being a parochial tone to this, but I had a slightly different experience. So you might remember dropping me off at the airport recently, Alicia, when I was on crutches. I had to go to Auckland and I had a bunch of gear with me and it was all a bit difficult because I was on crutches and trying to move luggage is hard. And some of it was delicate camera gear, which I would normally put in the oversized or special luggage department. They were like, yeah, no, we're just not doing that. You could go over there and ask, but it's probably not going to happen. And it's quite expensive stuff. So I hobbled over and the guy was like, yeah, nah, mate. You're going to have to go back over to the normal desk and just bang it on the normal luggage thing. Okay. I got there fine. So,
Look, Cam, I don't need this Australian racism coming over here shitting on Air New Zealand. We will defend it to the death, mate. This is New Zealand's
version. You won't
hear
hear me
of...
defending Qantas. They went from having a tremendous reputation to absolutely nosediving. They have shot them, they have compromised an incredible brand position with extreme speed. It's quite something.
Yeah, the whole time I was wondering if this was going to kick into a trans-Tasman debate, and I thought, Qantas, you've got no show. No show.
Did you just call me Qantas then? Have I just become the representative for an Australian band? That's
how this kind of ideological positioning works, isn't it? You are the thing.
Yeah, you are Qantas.
I've been anthropomorphized into an enormous corporate juggernaut, and frankly, I will fly down into the sea.
You can be Qantas when you piss me off from now on. But anyway, as I also recently discovered, thanks to my middle child Charlie, it's actually irrelevant because we're all a fucking meatball. Now, Charlie told me earlier this week that she had heard from someone. I've now done the research, and it's actually come out of a subreddit called I Did the Math on Reddit, where a user called, I think they might be a New Zealander because their username starts with Kiwi, has done the math and discovered that if you were to take all the people who were alive today and you were to blend them into a fine goo and then roll them into a meatball, which, like, why wouldn't you? If you were to do that, the resulting meatball would be about 1 kilometre wide. Like, it's not... I just want to, for those of you who got the audio, you are missing out on this meatball that this human meatball I've just presented.
Photoshop work here. There is I think it's about 800 meters across meatball being positioned next to a city in a really realistic representation of all of alive humankind in a meat goo.
Well, apparently, actually, because the reason that this has been chucked in here is that apparently the meatball would fit in Central Park in New York. That's the point. Like, you could fit the human meatball inside Central Park.
Yeah, that was my first thought, actually. Once we have this human meatball, where will we put it? Not many parks are that big. Like, you really need a good city park to house a meatball, because you wouldn't put it out in the countryside. You'd need it in a city somewhere.
Yeah, you need a big park for the meatball. And so discovering that, I think, has been a really, you know how some people go and stare at the stars in order to ponder their own universal, like, insignificance and have their existential thoughts there. I like this much better because to me it's a lot more tangible. And so the first thing I could think was, because, a meatball is round and so is Earth, apparently, we've been told. Now, if you contrast, I don't actually know how big Earth is. Cam, do you know what the size? I bet you do. What's the size of Earth?
Oh, you put me on the spot and I don't know. It's like 14,000 kilometres around the circumference, but I'd have to do I could Google it faster than I could do the maths, but...
the radius is 6,371 kilometres, right? So you've got Earth, which is a meatball that's approximately 6,000 times bigger than the human meatball.
Of meat now.
And so if you think of Earth as a meatball... and it's like 6,371 of these human meatballs. And God, we've really fucked it up, haven't we? Like, given the contrasting size of these meatballs, I'm not good on shapes. We have managed to wreak an impressive amount of devastation.
Like if you pulped up another substance on Earth into a similar size for effect, you really can't beat the human meatball for the catastrophic effect we've wrought on the world. So here's another question for you. How much air do you think there is in the world? I remember being really surprised to discover how thick the atmosphere was. So
Cam, you can't measure air, mate. I'm on to this riddle, mate. You're not going to get me here.
Looking forward to the segue into the flat Earth theory coming up soon. No, okay, so if Earth was the size of a basketball, how thick do you think the atmosphere is?
Okay, so I'm a little bit disoriented from changing balls, so just give me a minute.
Okay,
so
if Earth was the size of a 1 foot diameter meatball...
Thank you.
How many strands of spaghetti thick is the atmosphere?
I don't get the question. CV, can you pick this one up?
I'm still fixated on the fact that the Earth has a crust, and so I was thinking about the meatball pizza that you could make.
Well, I can tell this particular audience isn't interested in relative sizes of atmospheric thickness and meatball, but it's really thin. Like if Earth was a meatball the size of a basketball, the atmosphere is only like the thickness of your thumbnail. There's really not a lot of atmosphere between us and just void.
Right.
Wow.
So not only are we just like horrific meatball machines, just bags of meat, which actually, when you combine us, are quite insignificant. We're also not protected by much, and nor should we be, quite frankly.
And if you've got all the water in the world, if, again, to refer to the basketball-sized meatball, all the water in a sphere would only be the size of your a little bit of chopped onion. It's not a lot of water. It looks like a lot in the Pacific Ocean. Like, if you look at the Earth from one side, you're like, oh, that's a lot of water. But if you put it in a bowl next to the Earth-sized meatball, it's tiny. It's not much at all.
All right, we've got meatballs, we've got a crust, and we've got chopped onion.
We're getting close.
We're getting there. If we have a flat Earth, we can really get a pizza going.
Oh, then we can get a nerd formula going for calculating the volume of the pizza with pi. If Z is the radius of the pizza and A is the thickness, pi r squared height is the wrong audience. Nerds
I don't know what show you think this has become, mate, but I think what I want to move on to is for once in my life, my dog's going nuts. For once in my life, when I was involved in a really awkward social encounter with public bad behaviour, it wasn't me that was at fault. Yes, once. It's happened once, and it happened last night, and it may not happen again. And so I have to immediately just do something about this because I'm really excited. So generally, when we're out in public and we make really socially inappropriate decisions, I carry a lot of the blame, and rightly so. And last night, the three of us were out having a cheeky wine, and there was some fairly poor behaviour on display in quite a classy establishment, and I was not to blame. In fact, I'm not even across entirely what happened. So perhaps one or both of you would like to pick up and sort of just tell our audience what happened in a very classy wine bar in Wellington last night.
Which of us is getting thrown under the bus first, CV? This is quite a throw. I'll let you set it up. You set it up, CV, and I'll come in at the appropriate time.
I do need to take some responsibility here. So at the classy wine bar that we were at, there was what I thought was half a bottle of left behind wine at another table. And
so hang on a minute. Let's just pause. What was it that made you think this was left behind wine?
Prejudice.
It was on a table with no one else on it.
Yeah.
Like, it was a bottle of half a carafe of wine sitting on a table with no one seated at it. And CV says, I think someone's left half the carafe of wine behind. And I turn around and there's no one at the table and half a carafe of wine. Now, not being bound by a few social conventions that some people think are really important. For example, like, I'll eat a bit of leftover food on the next table, or as your kids have discovered, Alicia, I respond well online to a food dare. What do you mean, don't say this online? You brought it up.
Okay. Yep, let's just lay it all out.
Anyway, so I turn around and sure enough, there is an unattended carafe of wine sitting on a table. And my impression was that people had been sitting there. CV had noticed they had left and the wine remained on the table. And so I thought, naturally, I didn't want that wine to go to waste. So I stood up and stole it.
Now, Cam, do you drink wine?
No, I don't even like one.
So shortly after nabbing this carafe of red wine and popping it on the table, what happened, team?
Well, CV, can you take it for a moment?
It was one of those absolutely horrendous moments where you realize, like, I did something for reasons that to me made sense at the time, that just now are not holding up to reality. And sometimes you get that whiplash of, oh no, we shouldn't have done that, should we? And it's that horrendous feeling where the bottom drops out of your world and you're just so mortified.
Was that the moment Was that the moment when the man reached over to the table and said, "Excuse me, did you just steal our bottle of wine?"
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, it
pretty
was.
much. Yeah, that was quite a moment. And like, I haven't done anything like that for quite some time. And the feeling, it's a very.
Have you got priors though?
I've definitely got priors, like reaching over and stealing someone's stuff, or just behaving in a like, I don't know, presumptuous and slightly rude. But the ratio is usually that it should be funnier than it is mean. Like often those sort of pranks, like just straight up stealing something is not my style at all. But if it's funny, then if I believe it's funny or there's some sort of group benefit to an act of brazenness, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I'm definitely, while I'm really enjoying not being at fault here, I'm definitely not criticizing, because I am the woman that turned off all of the power to Mexico on Courtney Place after a few margaritas. And like, I'm not proud of that either.
Well, the thing that actually struck me about it was, so when we were going to the place, it's a classy enough place. So for the listeners, Noble Road is a classy wine bar in central Wellington, and Alicia was wearing tracksuit pants at a hoodie. And she was like, I'm not sure I'm going to meet the dress code. And the discussion at the time was, well, a place like that doesn't need a dress code because people dress like that don't try to go in, so you'll be fine. And so the man who was like, but this plays out. This is really relevant because the response to me brazenly stealing someone's carafe of wine was that the restaurant and the patron and the aggrieved man all played it pretty cool, and no one really got that upset. Like the waiter rolled with it. He came over to us. The patron told the staff. The staff came to our table later and, like, in a really apologetic way, were like, "We understand that there may have been an incident where you stole that man's carafe of wine. Is this true?" And I was like, "Yeah, look, absolutely, mate. Can't really defend that. An act of stupidity on an impulse, and I deeply apologise, and I'm very sorry." And he's like, "Yeah, look, these things happen. We've put I put a little bonus on their table, which I'm going to add to your bill. Would that be okay?" Like the whole way this was handled was very different than if you'd nick someone's schooner at a pub where you'd get glassed and thrown out and maybe get in a fight in the car park. So.
It was really classy, wasn't it? And so CV and I have talked about this a lot before, about how the presumption of character that comes with the privilege or the status or the outward appearance of wealth. Like, you don't drink at Noble Rot for fun if you're poor, right? Like, you've just spent $40 on 2 tiny pieces of cheese and you've got 4 glasses of wine at $20 a pop. Like, yeah, it's not a cheap night out. And so the presumption of character and the politeness you're afforded as a result is really fascinating, isn't it? Because, like, CV and I have talked about how easy it is to not get charged when you go out for a corporate lunch, and that hospo places sometimes just absorb that when people make a mistake, CV, because they want them back. Like the
there's a kind of busyness, and it's classic like magician misdirection, right? Because you have so many things going on. You're often you might be hosting people and you're really worried about that relationship, and also there's sort of the corporate traditions. So there's that masking who's going to pay quite often happens in the corporate lunch environment. So if you're being taken out by a recruiter or something like that, they'll generally get the coffee. But sometimes you can assume that without it necessarily having been the case, and you can genuinely and therefore confidently just wander off without having to pay.
Yeah, and I mean,
last night was quite. He did stress we are still welcome there. Like this
he was like, "Please don't stop coming."
Like, oh no! Please keep coming. You're still.
We love you guys,
there, but just maybe don't steal other people's wine.
Which is legit. And so in that particular case, it was the location that provided that overall kind of presumption of innocence. Other times
the way we carried ourselves with dignity.
No, that absolutely not. Well, I'd spent the day getting tattooed, and so I was in comfy clothes, and I was like, "Oh, should we really go to the classy place when I'm literally wearing trackies and a hoodie?" But yeah, as it turns out, we should. But the opposite version of that is when I've turned up at an airline counter or a rental car counter, and the difference in the way that I definitely feel as though I'm presumed innocent when I'm calling out a parking issue or something, when I'm dressed in work gear, and I'm like, hello, it's Alicia Mackay in a pencil skirt and a blazer with long eyelashes. I've got a problem. And they're like, of course, madam. Whereas when I schlep in wearing my ripped jeans and a hoodie, and I'm like, oi, you charged my parking wrong. And they're like, whatever, scumbag, get out. And I'm the same person, but there you go. And I noticed that really, really clearly all the time. So...
Well, one encounter that really springs to mind was when I was with a couple of friends, one of whom's a sailor, and we went to a yacht club on a day where they had obviously cracked out the social lubricant. And everybody there was absolutely hammered by the time we arrived. And a man who was literally on the floor still had just the natural inbred confidence of a rich, privileged, lovely man to look down on what I was wearing from the floor. I wasn't dressed well enough to go into this yacht club. I wasn't wearing my polo and my boat shoes. And a man who was so drunk that he was on the ground managed to look down on me. I'll never forget it.
Now that is class.
That is class.
Absolutely.
That
Absolutely
is
it is. And it was like, as we've often explored in this show and in our friendships and relationship, I usually represent the higher class or something, or the more privileged background. So yeah, it's all relative.
Yeah, I mean, that's how bogan we are. All right, CV, you've got a bit.
Oh yeah, I've got a bit. So Russia made a strange move last week. Russia decided to ban, by individually naming, 32, at first glance, apparently random New Zealanders. So the Russian Foreign Ministry issued a press release, which just was a sort of Excel spreadsheet of 32 New Zealanders who are, like, they're prominent New Zealanders, but it's a bit random. Like, so there's several mayors on there. That's understandable. There's several NZDF officials, but there's also just commentators and columnists and journalists. But that
so when you say banned, what does banned mean? Banned
means that they are not welcome in Russia. They would be refused on entry. Presumably, there's some sort of list that the Kremlin keeps.
You stole a carafe of wine the last time you were here. You are not welcome back.
Well, so
who gets to make the list? Sorry, I've got like procedural questions. Who gets to make the list? Like, not make the list as in I'm on the list. Make the list as in they're like, all right, we're going to write down all the bad Kiwis that we don't want to let back in. Give me a Russian name. I can't even think of a Russian name.
Vladimir?
Vlad, you've been to New Zealand recently. Write the Kiwi list.
So the assumption is that it's the Russian embassy here who would advise on those kinds of issues. So we haven't expelled the Russian ambassador, so there's still a diplomatic presence here. They'll be mixing and monitoring the New Zealand media and political scene and reporting back. There's the general diplomatic convention is you write fairly regular what's called dip towels. So those are diplomatic telegrams sent back to the foreign ministry headquarters, regularly reporting on the political and economic situation in the country that you're based. So I imagine that's where that list would have stemmed from, just drafted up 32. And the press release, which I translated from the Russian page, it was really interesting to read the actual raw material on this. So it accused them of having a Russophobic agenda.
I've heard this Russophobic business before.
Yeah. But what really interested me on a personal level was that a good friend of mine made the list. So my first tutor at university and someone I've kept in touch with since, who's a lovely man and fantastic left-wing Green Party activist, has now ascended to the post of Mayor of Dunedin and has been for a couple of years and made the list. So I've actually done a wee bit of journalism here. So Cam, if you could play the clip with my brief interview with Aaron Hawkins, Mayor of Dunedin, just to set the scene for this. So I sent him through a few questions. Understandably, he's a busy man. But I asked him, what is it like to be, how were you notified of this? How did that sort of come about? And the other thing, he was banned from Wetherell's Jewelers, which is a small jewellery store on George Street, Dunedin, which is the main street. And he was banned because the council changed the road rules and are making George Street one way. And the owner of Wetherell's Jewelers was so offended by this that he made a giant sign to put outside saying that Aaron Hawkins was banned from Wetherell Jewelers. So one of my questions, which he addresses in this clip, is what is it like to be the only man banned from both Wetherell's Jewelers and the entire nation of Russia?
All right, shall I drop the needle on that one, CV?
Yeah, play the clip.
Baffling elements of this is that we never received any official word from the Russian Foreign Ministry. I had to read about it on the news on Sunday morning. Nothing on a letterhead that we could get framed, and as such, hard to know exactly what it is that qualifies you to have a Russia-phobic agenda per their media release. But we can only assume that it has something to do with the role that cities and journalists have played here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, standing in solidarity with our Ukrainian communities and the people of Ukraine in the face of brazen and unwarranted military aggression from the Putin regime. And while this has been amusing over the past few days, at a personal level, I don't think we can lose sight of how serious the issues are in Eastern Europe at the moment, and how we should continue to fly the flag literally for Ukraine as the war continues on there. And it is certainly a step up from being banned from a local jewellery business. It is, as they say, a situation that has escalated quickly, and I'm not sure if I were a local business owner I'd want to be on a very short list that included just yourself and the Russian Foreign Ministry. But here we are. It is disappointing in that it's always been somewhere that I've wanted to go. Some significant moments in our cultural history as a civilization have been centred in that part of the world, and no self-respecting film major could not include the Odessa Steps on their list, or Chekhov's house, for example, or the Hermitage Museum, or any number of other options. But hopefully at some point there'll be a greater values alignment, as we say, between myself and the Russian administration. And this certainly isn't any kind of slight on Russia or the Russian people. It is absolutely centred around the actions of their current regime. And certainly, if one has to choose between war or peace, one would always choose peace.
That was my final little question for him: war or peace?
I'm muted. I was going to say, yeah, if you only get one, like, you might as well go for peace, eh? What an interesting chat. And do you know what? This is really kind of brought up for me, CV, is realizing that I'm out of the loop on Ukraine. And so while I was listening to Aaron, I was also Googling, like, what's going on in the Ukraine now? And in terms of the quantity and quality of coverage, despite the fact that there is still very active invasion, very active war, still people dying, still terrible things happening, it's just dropped off the bloody agenda. Oh, you're muted, CV.
He's muted.
Yeah. Like, God, we have a very short attention span, don't we? We're like, oh, is that, you're still doing that, are you? Still doing the war? Oh, we've got other things going on now.
Yeah, and you'll get the occasional just bad timing where we had a flood, we had a tsunami recently, and so the second one doesn't get as much sort of media attention. Or,
we've kind of done tsunami this month.
Donation drives.
And, I was involved in a press release for a really serious Operation H, the child digital sexual exploitation press release, happened on the same day as the Occupy protest was moved out of Parliament Lawns.
And
they couldn't change it because it was an international thing. So there was a whole bunch of other news agencies around the world who were connected to that release. They couldn't shift it, and it just got completely lost in the New Zealand press that day, which is really annoying.
It is annoying because you don't get to pick, and then it's like, oh, I know you saved a bunch of kids from being exploited online, but did you know that Khloe Kardashian had another baby? Because that's where we're at.
Yes, and sometimes it just happens, and there's nothing you can do. I mean, events just take over sometimes, but it's also it is a tactic. I mean, that's the famous West Wing thing, garbage day, where you put out all the news you don't want anyone to really pay too much attention at all at the same day.
Like, I'm not above following on from last week's discussion of why penis shouldn't be a naughty word. My favourite headline this week was I think it was decathlete furious at his own penis after it thwarted his race attempt. Halfway through running.
Whoa. What?
He was running a 400 or 800 meter race and had a wardrobe malfunction, and his penis just flopped out. And in the footage, which they've kept it on the wide angle camera, but this poor guy is running around the track, falling to a distant laugh as one of his hands is trying to conceal his knob as it's just flapping around in the breeze as he's running around a track at an elite level pace. And he was not happy about it either. This man was very angry at the end.
And how do we, like, from a news perspective, CV, how can you live a life where you're like, what I'm going to cover, like we just did in the last 45 seconds, let's talk about war on Ukraine, diplomatic relations and how it affects local government, a decathlete's penis, and Khloe Kardashian. How can you even think to do that for a job?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a Russian propaganda technique. It's called fire hose. The fire hose technique of just putting so much information out there that no one believes anything. No one really has any time for anything, and they just get stressed and don't do anything.
I think you've just summed up my week. And on that front, I'm also going to sum up the show. So here we are at 8:32 on Friday, the 12th of August, having covered for you a range of things from the Big Sick, CV and Callum's sick behaviour at a local wine bar that I am blissfully and blessed to be not implicated in for once in my life, the human meatball, war on the Ukraine, a decathlete's penis, and yes, Khloe Kardashian did just have another baby with that man, but I stand in solidarity with you, Khloe. It's not easy being dicked over by a stupid man. I got your girlfriend. All right, everybody, go and have a marvellous weekend, and we will catch you all next Friday.